Уважаемые коллеги, спасибо.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much that you found this opportunity to come to us. At our previous session at 8 o'clock, I warned everybody that we'll have an intrigue today at this session, and this intrigue can be seen already in our title. And today we'll speak about the situation which really is the area of responsibility of any pediatrician. This is the nutrition of children. In some cases we call them allergic conditions, and in some other situations they can be named differently. At our session, at our MED talk, we were expected to have the Professor Audrey Dunn Galvin from Ireland, from the pediatrics clinic, and also her daughter got flu, and then she also caught flu, and then also she was hospitalized. And for Ireland, it's really serious. So if a person is hospitalized, it means that the situation is quite difficult. We want her to recover quickly, and now at our MED talk we have also Yulia Yurkulova, professor and doctor of sciences. She works at Sechenov University. She is an expert on nutrition of the 9th Children Hospital, and also Daniil Moonblit, and he has here 3 functions at this session. He is an associate professor, Department of Pediatrics and Children's Infectious Diseases, Clinical Institute of Child Health, named after Filatov I Moscow State Medical University, Sechenova. And also he is an allergologist. He's an expert of the professional community, and for us this is really valuable. So nutrition of children suffering from allergic conditions. I would like to say that there is something common between industry, between physicians and patients, and there is also the manufacture of food. Especially for these patients. I would like to give the floor to Julia. Julia, please tell us about the situation now. And colleagues, please be active, prepare your questions. We'll be glad to hear your questions, but questions will be very specific. In this case, answers will be short and also quite precise. Dear colleagues, thank you very much that you have come here on Saturday, so you found the time to come here to our pediatrics session, and maybe the half of the auditorium consists of pediatricians, and today within the framework of my presentation, I will speak about some problems which we face when we give nutrition to such children at hospitals. I will speak not only about allergic patients, but also I will expand my presentation. We have patients for whom there are so the nutrition should be quite special. Patients with skin disorders who go to emergency rooms, emergency departments. These are our small patients, children I now don't speak about those who don't have enough weight, but children who have diarrhea, vomiting, and anorexia, different disorders, stomach disorders, and bowel responds quite fast to hunger. And we have also two departments dedicated to burns, and there are problems also with nutrition, because these patients can develop ulcers. Patients who come to our hospitals can be treated conservatively with the help of modern medications, but also we can give them special nutrition. In stress situations, so usually stress situation, this means functionalities of stomach. So maybe you all faced this problem that unfortunately for today there are many disorders in nutrition regarding mother and child. Our global network does not give such good education for parents to give good nutrition to healthy babies, even babies with disorders. That's why ill education and also poverty, not good access to education can lead to disorders. Then patients who come to us and whom we see at hospitals already, so there are many diseases which can lead to serious disorders, serious problems, losses of nutrients, and that's why food violation leads to risks of different complications, septic infection, inflammatory complications. And maybe today you already heard such a term, nutrient support. This is the same support as antibacterial, respiratory, and also nutritional. When a child still cannot utilize some nutrition ingredients and has additional food, and our goal is to provide necessary energy, and also to protect function of the bowel. Why is it important? If teenagers still can tolerate several days without food, and nothing scary is here. But if we speak about children with low weight or the babies of the first year, they continue to develop and grow, and they need amino acids and all necessary ingredients. So the algorithm of choice, so enteral food is important, and enteral nutrition, and in our clinic we have developed different methods, probes, and now when there is the lack of nutrients, this is some other ways. If we speak about food, you can see 70s of the last century, when mixtures for enteral food appeared, and fat emulsions based on soy oil. In the 90s, we had a lot of research regarding stress metabolism, and the name appeared as hunger, and there are fatty emulsions of the second generation. 2000. This is active usage of different types of nutrition, and also active usage of polysaturated fatty acids like olive oil and fish oil. This is for increase of immune response, and during last 20 years these are already very promising researchers. Nutrition becomes safer, and now we know that we are trying now to expand nutrition, and we have a high-calorie nutrition. Also have the emulsion of the fourth generation. Now, what do we have in the clinical nutrition? We have a lot of mixtures for enteral food. I don't speak now about substitutes of milk, of breast milk, but these are the mixtures for children who need this. Also speaking about probes for enteral nutrition are used actively in pediatrics. They are used for alone storage, and they don't cause erosion, and parental nutrition became safer. Now we have also catheters for nutrition at home, because we have patients with these syndromes of short bowel, and they need this nutrition at home. Maybe in your practice also you have seen this. Also development of neonatology. These are children with low weight, and so they should have two methods of nutrition. Both here we have new technologies of parental nutrition. Speaking about enteral nutrition, it's linked with less complications. It's cheaper than parental, but I can say that enteral nutrition also is not so safe. It has a lot of complications, and here we can see quite a lot of issues. Parental nutrition. We are pediatricians, work with children, and physiological nutrition or through natural ways is preferable. And parental nutrition, this is not physiological, and this is already always the secondary choice. For today, we don't we don't compare these two ways of nutrition. They are complementary, and if a child has artificial pulmonary ventilation, if he had some bad circulation in stomach, it's very difficult to give him food, but when patient starts to digest parental food, it means that soon this patient will eat in a natural way. If, for example, if there are no any risks of bleedings, in this case we use the natural way of eating. Indications. Here there are also many things. Child age, because here there is a difference whether this is 500 gram child or 50 gram child. So weight is important. Then the severity of the state and possibilities of gastrointestinal tract. For today, I think it's not a secret for you, but very often surgeons have these tactics to prolong the to prolong this artificial method of nutrition, and surgeons ask us sometimes to do.
But the earlier we provide enteral nutrition, the better it is, because enteropathy is today considered as quite an efficient method, and it is recommended to start enteral nutrition as soon as possible. So today, if there is a possibility, it is necessary to provide enteral nutrition, and in addition, now seeding is used. So sometimes a patient may complement normal nutrition with sipping. There are some requirements towards mixes that are used for infants, since young children need nutritious elements such as choline, carnitine, taurine, inositol, and so on. And the mixes and baby food for children of young age need to be selected carefully. In addition to enteral nutrition, often electrolytic solutions are used, nutraceuticals are used, as well as hydrolysates. Such a scheme of introducing nutrition allows to reduce costs on enteral nutrition. But what is better? Is it better to use specialized mixes or regular food? Sometimes people are asking why using those special mixes or formulas while regular nutrition could be used. But since we are speaking about children with various conditions, unfortunately it is very difficult to ensure all the necessary nutrients coming from regular food. Preparing such food at home will require a lot of time, vitamins will be destroyed during cooking, and in addition we will never be able to know the exact composition of a product. So, as of today, the advantage of formulas is the following. We know the composition and the nutritious value of the formula. The composition is balanced, it corresponds to the age requirements, it is sterile, and all the vitamins, microelements and electrolytes are provided. But here you can see still the picture of a doctor when he sees a young child and he doesn't know which formula to select and what will be better for a particular infant. First of all, the formula may be based on different types of protein. It may be based on whole protein, milk protein, soya protein, and so on. In addition, sometimes children have organ deficiencies, and this also needs to be taken into account if the child suffers from diabetes, hyperglycemia, liver insufficiency, and so on. This all will impact the composition of the formula. Today on the market we can find standard formulas, hypo, iso, and hyper caloric, oligomeric formulas, and so on. And sometimes it's easy to make a mistake. As for the protein that is used, there are polymeric formulas, there are formulas based on peptides. They contain from 2 to 99 amino acids, and there are also element-based formulas. Their use is restricted, they are not used very actively, but they are available still, and they are used in pediatrics. The nutritious function. Even minimum doses of regular nutrition increase the production of hormones, normalize the motorics, the bowel movements, and improve the barrier function of the gastrointestinal tract. As for sipping, there are various options of this kind of nutrition, especially for children who can differ tastes. They may select the pleasant taste like vanilla or cappuccino. In babies, in premature infants, the situation is a bit better than in older children, because for infants, clinical recommendations are regularly produced. And there are all the guidelines available regarding the age of such nutrition, the amount, and the enteral substrate in their case is, of course, breast milk. There are different kinds of alimentation of the newborns, even for those whose weight is less than 1 kilo, but still their nutrition should be based on breast milk and breast milk boosters. Our patients are often patients with gastrointestinal tract impairments, and of course hydrolysates are often used in that case. As for the complications of the enteral nutrition, they may be the stomach complications, mechanical complications, and metabolic complications. If we introduce probiotics, that often helps to improve the situation. In order to prevent complications, we should use closed systems and, of course, wash hands before preparing the system, ensure sterilization, and not use the container system for more than 1 day. What are the difficulties that we face most often when using clinical nutrition? First one is the bad choice of formula. If the formula is not adapted to the age, it will lead to a number of complications. Bad dilution of the formula, hypercaloric mixes are not always the main choice, because their complication is malabsorption. Another kinds of mistakes include bad feeding regimen, technical mistakes when establishing the tube, and the lack of knowledge of the medical personnel, because unfortunately medical personnel is not always well aware of the novelties in this area, especially when it comes to more severe patients. Even if we are speaking about regular formula, even easy cases, sometimes for the medical personnel it's difficult to answer those questions. To correct the mistakes, of course, the medical personnel should strive to enhance the level of knowledge about medical nutrition. Medical nutrition is really a big issue today, so almost every hospital has nutrition specialists today, because this is a huge treatment factor. Here I'd like to show you some books that can be useful. This is a book about clinical nutrition in surgery. This book is very good, and it is in great demand in St. Petersburg. This book includes everything available today regarding the nutrition status, and all the formulas are provided in one book. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Rina. That's an amazing presentation. It is very informative. 10 years ago, back in 2006, the Ministry of Healthcare instructed to provide medical nutrition in the intensive care units, and it turned out that for doctors it was difficult to find information and literature. Therefore, a competition between various university departments was organized. Back then, I worked at the chair of reanimatology of the Second Medical University, and we wrote a whole series of books, and that series scored second in the all-Russian competition. And back then, the chair invited for training 100 reanimatologists. That is why we have now a lot of experts who are well aware of the nutrition issues, in particular of children with allergies, who quite often require ICU assistance. And now we are going to get to the most controversial subject of our agenda. You have been warned probably that we have been planning to discuss this risky area where there is no consensus between parents, doctors and producers. Daniel, you have the floor. I remind you that we are having a med talk, and you can participate, you can ask the audience and so on. Thank you very much, dear friends. Thanks to everyone who came here on this Saturday, a weekend day. It's pleasant to speak on this subject, and I think that my speech will be very different from what you usually hear at conferences, so I am grateful to the organizers for accepting to cover such specific and particular questions. On this slide you can see my conflict of interests, and often you see that speakers miss this slide. Pay attention to the conflict of interest. Pay attention to it every time, because it's important. As you can see here I don't have conflict of interest. I don't get money from formula producers and from milk pump producers and other producers. And you're also not getting money from the organizers. Yes. Today we're going to speak a little bit about breastfeeding. Of course, today that remains the most important, the most recommended approach. When it's possible to breastfeed, it should be done. Then we are going to switch to the clinical recommendations, the opinion of the formula producers, and we are going to consider the existing practice and the recommendations for young mothers to follow a strict diet or to switch to formula. Many of you have probably seen this WHO poster that says that breastfeeding is what's needed by every child, and to the left you can see in green the reasons that explain why breastfeeding matters, and on the right side there are some recommended actions. So pediatricians, neonatologists and scientists all over the world should perform those recommended actions. To the left you can see the explanation of breastfeeding benefits. It's the recommendation to breastfeed exclusively for 6 months, since it provides protection and also nutritious elements. And among recommended actions we can find limits on formula marketing, and this is the aspect where we experience failure, not just in Russia but all over the world. Here is the research that we conducted in London in 2 big university hospitals. Those hospitals were undergoing audit of a baby-friendly hospital, and everyone was concerned about breastfeeding, why it's necessary, how to do it. And when we were asking midwives about breastfeeding, opinions varied. By the way, in the UK there are also midwives, not doctors, but this medium medical personnel, and we asked them what prevents them from supporting breastfeeding. They were saying that they were lacking time to do it. We provided them with the possible scenarios. We provided them with several scenarios, asking in which situation they would switch a newborn onto formula. 90% of them have made at least one mistake in those scenarios, in spite of the fact that they got constant training. Still, they were selecting the scenarios in a wrong way. Of course, one has to say that this is partially the result of the marketing actions of formula producers. You can see what's written on this pack, our closest to breast milk. So even this label is a marketing trick. It is said that it is almost the same as breast milk, although of course not. We know that breast milk contains hundreds of biologically active components. So this is just the first step. The second step is adding biologically active components in formula. This formula, for example, is marketed as the first and only formula with exclusive combination of MFGM and milk fats. They are crucial for the development of infants, so this formula improves the cognitive performances of a baby. Ask yourself, what's wrong about this message? And if it is so crucial for a developing baby, if it's so crucial for the brain development, why is it the only formula that provides it? What's wrong with the other ones? So if this component is so crucial, maybe every formula needs to have it. There is a Codex Alimentarium that includes the components necessary for every formula. So maybe MFGM should be part of every formula, but no, it's used as a marketing action. And I have to say that several years later, a review article was published, and a conclusion was made that as of today there is not enough evidence to recommend this formula and say that MFGM stimulates brain development. So the authors of the study do not believe that this formula contributes to the cognitive development, although you can find this formula in shops and it is promoted as marketed as a cognitive function boosting formula. Another important aspect is that presence of a biological active component in breast milk doesn't mean that this component plays a crucial role in reducing the risk of a disease, for example. However, it is promoted quite often, and formula producers find sometimes such magical components, add them to the formula, and market it as something that determines the development of a baby. Here you can see this comment. It is a letter that was sent by several co-authors, representatives of the toxicology department of FDA, Food and Drug Administration, the American regulator you're probably aware of. In this letter they highlight this particularity. It's an important point, and adding one component with unclear activity doesn't mean that this will have some long-term consequences for the baby. So then a question emerges. What does it depend on? Probably everything depends on our perception. You have probably seen this picture. There are people who see one thing on this picture and others. Who sees a praying woman on this picture?
And who can see here a man with a mustache or a beard? So you can see different things in this picture. The same happens to the data. Data can be different. You can see only a piece of data, and there can be some focus on this piece of data emphasized for you in a good way. I would like to show you an example. This is the trial where authors considered the results of research on antidepressants. They used Freedom of Information Act in the USA, and they from FDA they received all data on this trial's result on antidepressants, and these are the results of trials. They showed the positive effect. They showed that antidepressants are efficient. You can see here squares, white squares, and they show that the results of these trials also were published, and in this article, everybody was agreed that this is valid. These trials were valid, but not everywhere they were published. You can see this by black squares, and the same regarding a lot of medications and different medical interventions. When we look at these squares colored differently, the answer is apparent: antidepressants work. But when colleagues looked through all trials, it proved to be that those trials which were negative, which did not show efficacy of antidepressants, so they were not published, or they were published, but FDA disagree with their outcome. But when you can see this full picture, it changes your perception and your attitude, because here there is already doubt about the efficacy of many antidepressants. This is just an example. And what about producers of formulas? What do we face in our practice? There is such a notion as a health claim. I don't know how to translate this in Russian 100%, and the claim. This is a statement, and health, this is health. So this is something which is written on a back, and statements concerning properties of this formula regarding health of kids, of babies. For example, a unique ingredients for development of intellect. We looked at formulas which are at the Russian market. Our student, Tatiana Sinelnikova, she conducted this analysis. And as you see, there are different types of formula. There are no any preferences. And about 1/4 of formula at our market focus on different types of development, cognitive development, and so on. And what is the basics of this? The trials on polysaturated fatty acids. There were several trials. They are updated regularly, and each update of this analysis comes to the same conclusion that for today we have low evidence, and milk formulas with polysaturated fatty acids does not make any difference. And 1/4 of formula at the market, at our market, say that this formula with the addition of acids don't really stimulate cognitive development. Another standard, and this is not our problem, We have European examples. These are formulas from some stomach disturbances. About 10% of formulas have this statement. So they also help regarding colics. And also there is low evidence, and so we can't now change the diet of babies because of this low evidence trials. And another example, this is allergy risks. So there are some presenters who speak about, allergy to protein and milk, and this is not only the Russian problem. This is SMHA. These are formulas which are sold in Great Britain. Also, they allegedly minimize risk of allergy development. And I make this picture from the last PAM Congress. It takes part twice. It's organized by European Academy of Allergology, and we see these posters in Nestlé boutique, and they say that non-HA declines risks of atopic dermatitis by 50%, long-term effect till 15 years, but actually this trial, we have only one trial, Genie, which Nestle had, and many conferences were dedicated to this trial, but it's only one, and we published meta-analysis. So meta-analysis, this is all trials together, combined together, and all data of this trials are accumulated in this meta-analysis in order to have one conclusion. Because if we've had only one trial on one piece of population, we cannot expand this to other populations of other countries. And also here there is low evidence. We can't minimize these allergic risks with the usage of this formula. And another example from my practice, they met representatives of formula producers, very often distribute advertisement materials, and there it's written that this formula declines the risk of allergy development, and there is the link underneath. You can't see it now, but here you can see this link, the link to my colleague work from Imperial London College, and in this link, so if a physician wants, he can go to this link, or maybe a mom of a baby, she can also use this link. She can find this article, and she can see the conclusions of doctors. But unfortunately, the situation is different. If you go to this link and see the results of this trial, you can see that atopic dermatitis in this trial developed, and these children they consume this formula 20%. And those children who received just standard formula also developed dermatitis. So no difference. What is it? I will not invent any characteristics. You can do this yourself. But here in these trials, this trial did not show any efficacy of this formula. And there is a question, why does it happen so often? Why does it happen also in the Western countries and around the globe? And maybe there is the conflict of interests. You could see the results of the trial of my colleagues, the results of the meta-analysis which I showed. It also says about absence of any effect of these formulas. But also when I open clinical recommendations of 2016, I can see here, I can read that for prevention of allergy, formula can be used on the basis of hydrolyzed milk protein. And also including this formula, which also was on the previous slide. This is it. And you can see it's also in the list of formulas which are recommended. Why so? How come? So this is not our published data, but maybe soon they will be issued. Some part of the article was the analysis of clinical recommendations in different countries. About 80% of authors, even more, spoke about financial conflict of interest. So those people who wrote clinical recommendations have financial conflict of interest with formula manufacturers. That's why it is so, and also some clinical recommendations were directly supported, and this is the application of the working group which developed our clinical recommendations. And please pay attention that authors approve that there was no financial support, but I'm doubtful about it. I don't know why. It's not good to speak about conflict of interests. We have to do this and promote. Until we don't speak about this, we are pediatricians, academicians, professors, cannot change the situation. We always should speak up about our conflict of interest. People should be honest. For example, you can say, I conduct a trial, thank you, this company, and in this case only we can really evaluate the situation objectively. These are the consensus on prevention of allergy. So in the in the Middle East, and this is a piece which can be referred to their conflict of interests. It's written that all authors received support for transport expenses and also for visiting meetings in the office. And also here it's written that support in writing and development of the document itself was given by doctor from the company Choice Healthcare Solutions. And this is surprising. We are trying to understand what company it is, Choice Healthcare Solution, and we pay attention that this company helps to write. And there is a question again, how can we trust these documents and the recommendations when interested party wrote this document, quite biased party? And this also was quite, popular. And what did authors say? In the end of 2018, authors from USL, there was the analysis of the author. He spoke about diagnostics on this allergy for milk, cow milk, and also he spoke about the link with the marketing. And he spoke about over-diagnostics. But in Great Britain, so specialized formula, amino acid formulas and hydrolyzed formulas, they can be bought only using the prescription. And that's why he could analyze this prescriptions, and he said that the growth was 50%. And it's reimbursed by the system of healthcare. The expenses of healthcare increased by 700%, and these figures could be adequate if we speak about crazy growth of allergy for cow milk, but we don't have this data. Of course, we did not have this growth. This data was not published, but maybe soon, in a couple of months, this data will be published. And this is our data analysis which we have conducted. This is growth of expenses, and you can see the trend. So this green curve illustrates overall expenses of healthcare system. You can see this curve is quite stable, and there is also a trend for growth of expenses on other formula. What can we see in our clinical practice? Very often we see the situation when we have a breastfeeding mom and a baby has a non-specific response. It can be any response. For example, liquid, so for example, diarrhea or constipation, rash, or so anything can happen. And then, what should we do with this baby? Should we stop breastfeeding? Maybe mom should should keep to a diet, or should we give him formula? But for mom, for the mother, it's a very difficult solution, because we can say that in our pediatric community we promote breastfeeding. That's why psychologically for the mother it's also difficult. And there is a question: if a baby has a breastfeeding, what is it really probable because of his mother's diet? And now we have the project. We have already publications. Some part of the project is a systematic review of all trials which were conducted in the world, and they measured the level of proteins in milk, and at some stage we already processed this data. There were some trials where the level of proteins in breast milk are measured. Mostly these are proteins of cow milk, and this is lactoglobulin. This is one of the protein of cow milk. And the second place, this is the trial dedicated to eggs. Also, babies can develop allergies to eggs, and so very often babies develop this allergy to cow milk very often. And now we have data. We have seen all trials. We can see all protein concentration in milk. Now the second part, and then you will understand my idea. When we speak about allergies, in Europe, they define the threshold dosages of allergens which can be permitted in food for labeling. So we conducted some trials which were included in Vital project. What happened in these trials? Babies with allergies participated, and samples were taken. Baby receives some particular food product, and then we can see whether a baby has tolerance to it or not. You give him an egg and then more egg, so it means that he doesn't have allergy.
If we give the product to the child and the child reacts, to some dose, we know what's the exact dose to which the child has a reaction. And gradually, some data was assembled regarding the amount of protein to which even allergic patients will not react. For example, if some egg is given, if we take a very small dose, no one will react to that. Based on this research, these curves were made, and we learned data about different products. So what do we still have to do? We need to identify an average volume of one feeding. We took data from some breastfeeding experts, and we took the maximum amount of feeding of a baby of 3.5 months. Actually, 260 milliliters is a very big amount. On average, it is much less. So what do we see? We see the concentration of protein in breast milk. We have 216 milliliters of breast milk, which is a big amount, and we also have information about the doses that trigger reaction in 1% with allergy to this product. What does it mean from the clinical point of view? I'm going to give you an example. This is data from a piece of research that included several groups of mothers, one of which got a lot of eggs. Here is this group, and this is the concentration that was detected in mother's breast milk. We made very conservative calculations. So we took the maximum value and the most negative scenario. So 0.96 is 1 nanogram per milliliter. So imagine one feeding of 216 milliliters. So it is about 216 nanograms. So we are speaking about 0.0004 milligrams of egg protein. If the mother eats eggs, that's the amount that the infant gets in the worst case scenario, the most conservative scenario. Now let us see where it falls on this curve. You can see here the percentages as well as the probability of a child with an allergy to eggs reacting to this dose. So it will be here, it's almost 0% of probability. Do these children exist? Yes, they do. Maybe there is some co-stimulation through other biological components that are part of breast milk. So such children do exist, but there are not thousands of them as formula producers are often trying to show, fortunately for our patients. The same pertains to beta-lactoglobulin. This data is still being analyzed. Actually, in half of mothers, this beta-lactoglobulin is not detected in breast milk, and the number of women who have certain concentrations of this protein in breast milk that can trigger reaction in 1 or 2% of children with allergy to cow milk is 2% of samples. So the probability of a child allergic to cow protein will respond to the milk products eaten by his or her mom is very low, but it still exists. We need to be based upon probabilities in medicine, so we are only using probability characteristics. Is there a possibility for a child with allergy to cow milk to respond and react to the milk products eaten by his mother? Exists, although it's very small. Here is data based on a group of children that were part of the EAT research. The results of this study were published in 2016, the control group included 650 infants. These were breastfed babies. These are non-specific symptoms that were noticed by parents. It was vomiting, colics, and eczema or atopic dermatitis. As you can see, sometimes parents linked those situations with them eating milk. This is highlighted by green. Where they intersect, that's a reason for thinking. But all these children had provocative tests. They were given milk, and it was considered whether they have cow milk allergy. It is in yellow. So the quantity of these children was infinitesimally small. So such children do exist, but they are not numerous, 0.7%. Unfortunately, the situation is complex. Because, for example, we know that we have very good initiatives, very nice initiatives. For example, the project of our government that gives presents to moms in maternity. But here we can see a battle for formula feeding. And it's difficult to explain why it is here. Maybe colleagues are not just well informed about that. There is also the program University of Motherhood. They give such gifts to mothers all around the country, and such bags include medicines, which is unacceptable, I think, because parents should not take decisions about providing medicines to their children, especially if it is the first child in the family. It's not acceptable to give medicine for a baby to stop crying. And also in these bags we can find formula samples, and I would like to highlight once again that this program provides such gift bags to mothers on the 2/3 of the Russian territory, thus promoting formula. I've often heard the people saying that it's industry, it doesn't make sense to fight because these are corporations and so on. But I'd like to show you an example of how the situation changed in Great Britain over 1 year. Yes, indeed, it required a lot of discussions, and it was triggered by the article in BMJ. That was the statement of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. This college stated that it will no more take any sponsor funds on behalf of the formula producers. No funds at all, neither for sponsoring congresses nor for sponsoring trips. After that, there was the BMJ that published the decision of the British Medical Journal. And by the way, BMJ is a big publishing house that includes, apart from the British Medical Journal, many well-known editions such as Thorax, Cut, Repertory of Disease in Childhood, and in this editorial column they stated that the BMJ and all the BMJ journals will not publish any advertising on behalf of the formula producers. The losses of BMJ amounted to around £300,000, which is around $400,000 in 2020. So that was their decision. They lost $400,000. I have to say that around $50,000 to $60,000 are the losses of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. So both organizations decided that they cannot anymore place themselves in the position of people dependent upon the formula producers and criticized for that. The situation has changed radically because the formula producers that before could dictate their conditions cannot do it anymore because they have lost their lever of influence upon doctors, nurses, and other medical staff. I think that this is something that could be done in our country. Of course, this is a long way and it may take some time, and of course there will be many people who will not have a positive attitude to that because of their own conflict of interest perhaps, but I think that it is a good and attainable goal. And I'd like to thank my colleagues from different universities in different countries and cities of the world who conduct joint studies with us on that. Thank you. I always forget to turn on the microphone. Colleagues, this has been a very interesting presentation. I can say that I do have my own experience of interacting with the WHO and the UNICEF regarding the preservation of breastfeeding. When we discuss those aspects, we should never forget that there are significant categories of children that need breastfeeding replacement. These are children whose mothers cannot give them this milk for various reasons, including healthcare reasons. These are adopted children, orphans, when the foster family cannot give the child any milk. In our country, there are almost no orphanages, so almost all children are in families, and there they have to use formulas as well. I'm probably too excited and that's why I'm coughing. Regarding collaboration with the formula producers, I think it's unavoidable. But the studies that have been shown by the big international group of experts, one of which is Daniel, of course should be taken into account, and it is clear that in any case, when formula is prescribed, we should remember that this is unavoidable and should be used only in cases when there is no other choice. That is why I think that this information will be useful for everyone. We wanted to give the floor to the audience. I think that it would be very interesting to listen to you. I know that there are some interesting people here today. I would like Ilya Korsunsky to speak about his experience. Colleagues, we have 15 minutes. I will be brief. I think I will say something for all of us. We all receive medical representatives, it's not a secret, including representatives of producers of formulas, breast milk substitutes, and what Daniel showed about Boyle article. Actually, they came to me and I followed the link and read what was written there. Of course, I know Daniel, so I saw the Boyle family name and I was a bit surprised that Robert Boyle wrote this. So I spent 20 minutes of my time. I found this article in PubMed and I read just the conclusion, not the article itself. And I urge you to do like that with all the materials that you receive. This story had a certain continuation. I will tell about it. Next time, the same representative of the same company came to me and asked him, could you please comment on the fact that the article you are referring to actually states the contrary to what you wrote, to what's written on the package of the formula. The representative was surprised since she did not read this article. She said, I'll ask my management. She went to her management and sometimes she came back and told me that it was a mistake, a typo. And actually they wanted to leave a link to another publication. I asked her to which one. And in her presence I started reading this link. She said, you will not find this article. I asked her, how come? She said, I'll show you. And she gave just a printout of remarks for the internal meeting of the company. Their company organized an internal meetings. And by the way, we are also sometimes invited to such conferences. It's not a scientific conference, but it's the internal event of the company where there is good food and alcohol and there are some interesting things. And we're happy to go there. We receive some information and she brought the same materials. I showed those materials to Daniel, to Robert Boyle. So their family names were in this article, and I asked him, what are these materials? And I was told that these are the materials that were not published, but they were withdrawn, and the company continued to spread them. They brought those articles to me, for example, and I think that that representative was laid off already because the company will ultimately, I think, blame her. So please be attentive. If you receive some materials on behalf of medical representatives, please spend 5 or 10 minutes of your time. Use Google Translate. Just see what they are referring to, because they are giving wrong links. Sometimes they are lying. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens sometimes. So please be vigilant. Thank you. Yuri? May I just make a small remark? Of course, it's all very nice, but let us ask what's the situation with the breast milk bank? In the UK, for example, unfortunately in Russia, we don't have a breast milk bank and we have no choice. Yes, indeed. By the way, I forgot to mention that BMJ authors also mentioned that neither they nor we don't have the goal of fighting the industry. We don't have the goal of saying that breast milk substitutes are not needed. We just want to ensure good marketing. The main issue that we are facing is that marketing of breast milk substitutes is sometimes a bit aggressive, and the statements on their products do not match evidence. So what's written there does not correspond to the reality. Otherwise, of course, regarding breast milk bank, in the UK, the situation with breast milk banks is much better than in our country. There, it's not as good as it could have been, but still there are several large breast milk banks in large hospitals, but still they are lacking. Recently, in the UK, the first private breast milk bank was organized. It was largely supported.
Also, they got the grant for the development. I think 1.5 million pounds. They directly work with hospitals, and they receive and they deliver this milk to babies who need it. The situation has changed there. Oh, okay. One more voice from the audience. Hello, my name is Darina Ashokin. I am a member of the project Allergy Mom. I would like to thank our remarkable speakers for patience and it's a good also possibility. We have now have more and more possibilities for us and for patients because we inform patients, communicate to them. We are not physicians, but still in our association we have the medical council, and in this medical council there are physicians. But I would like to speak about patients and about mothers' problems. We have such kids. Just in brief, this is the system where we have many factors. There are such kids, and I have two of them who had to receive hydrolyzed formula, and thanks God that we have this formula. So for them it was good, it was an advantage, but now parents, I have been dealing with parents for many years, for 5 years already. So these parents now face the problem when they are, they don't know what to do. First, there is propaganda of breastfeeding, practically all mothers do this, but not everybody. Then there is the situation when so mothers don't like when formula is used at the maternity house. Sometimes doctors don't even ask mothers about this, and sometimes babies go to doctor's hands at the maternity house, and they get some milk, artificial milk formula. And then also we so we have mothers who also faced these disorders. Usually the most active moms, these are moms of babies till 1 year. And usually these babies have some rashes. For example, so practically 90% of these moms say this word that. But there are also some other events, where we don't have physicians and a lot of consultants, and there is no control of what these people can say to these mothers. For example, mothers can go to this doctor, Daniil, for example, and he will explain what happens. And these people, consultants, who are not physicians, also can give her brochures, for example, named atopic dermatitis. But maybe mothers will go to some shops and buy a formula which is not needed for this baby. This issue is not regulated. Moms are not well educated, and a lot of mothers come to me and say this word diet, pronounce this word, but she doesn't really know what to do about this. In many cases, we recommend physicians, and very often we find out that diet is not needed for these children, and our patients face this issue very often. And it starts from the beginning, and then from the birth, and then babies have formula, mothers give them this formula. We always support mothers. If mothers makes decision to add formula, this is fine, but it should be her choice. Some other questions? Hello. I'm here as a parent. I have a question. I'm also allergic. My mom is allergic, and I have 3 kids, 3 babies. They are all allergic. My third baby is allergic to everybody. Can eat only buckwheat and rabbit. You spoke a lot about people allergic to milk protein. Maybe this is the allergy to antibiotics, not to protein. If we speak about this protein, this is allergy to protein. It can be casein, any protein, but this is protein allergy, not antibiotic allergy. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for this, for your activity. I hope it was interesting for you. I would like to comment on polysaturated fatty acids. This is a serious problem. Also, when we speak about bilateral food administration, and especially this is important for small kids, for small babies. Thank you very much, speakers, organizers, and all of you. Thank you very much. We fit our schedule. I wish you be healthy. Stay healthy. If you are allergic to something, please come to our city diagnostics center of immune.